Imagine a company that was valued at $47 billion and was preparing for a triumphant IPO, but collapsed almost overnight. Much of this happened because its founder began to believe in his own infallibility. It sounds like the myth of Icarus, who flew too close to the sun and burned his wings. You might say that such things don't happen or that it's unrealistic in life. Unfortunately, this is the absolute truth, and it's not even the biggest failure in history, and all because of our ego. It's no coincidence that ancient wisdom says, "Pride goes before destruction, and arrogance before fall." Ego, excessive pride, and self-conceit have repeatedly become the cause of loud failures. From legends of deadly overconfidence to the collapse of entire nations and 21st century corporations, history teaches us one thing. When ego makes the decision, disaster is not far away. But what if we could turn off our ego when making important decisions? What if we could make decisions without being attached to personal ambitions and resentments? In this video, we will conduct a deep exploration of the de-egoization of the decision-making process. From the philosophical treatises of the Stoics, religious and folk wisdom, to modern scientific research and business cases. You will learn how mindfulness and humility help to avoid cognitive traps and why ego is our greatest enemy. How the best leaders achieve success by removing their ego from the way. We will analyze practical tools for the de-egoization of the decision-making process, and you will understand how to make wise decisions in your life and business. This video will be useful for everyone, but especially for leaders of all levels, whether it's business, politics, or investment. Watch this video to the end, and you will find the source of your mistakes and failures, and also learn to make decisions more consciously and wisely. Subscribe to my channel, click the bell, actively comment, and share this video with people you consider ambitious. Believe me, they will be very grateful to you. So, are you ready to disarm your inner enemy and saboteur? Then let's go. The ideas of restraining the ego go back centuries. Stoicism teaches humility and a sober assessment of oneself. The Stoics saw ego as the source of suffering and mistakes. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily not to give in to arrogance. Seneca, being wealthy, deliberately practiced living in poverty to preserve his mind. They believed that humility kills dangerous pride before pride destroys everything dear to them. As a modern researcher writes, ego constantly compares itself with others and enters into endless competition. Stoicism, on the other hand, is a way to weaken the ego and become more compassionate and modest. Not only Western sages warned about the traps of ego. In Buddhism, it is believed that a stable self is an illusion, and attachment to the ego is the source of suffering. Buddha taught to let go of selfish desires to achieve enlightenment. Buddhist wisdom says that attachment to ego is fundamental ignorance that causes human suffering. If there is no inflated sense of self-importance, then resentment fades away. As the text says, we would avoid so many conflicts if we let go of the need to constantly defend ourselves. In Confucianism, humility is a virtue. Confucius said that true knowledge is the awareness of the degrees of one's own ignorance. This allows room for growth and keeps the ego in check. He despised boasting and empty pride. A noble man is modest in speech, but diligent in action, he said. Pride has been condemned for centuries. There's a saying among the people, the higher you fly, the harder you fall. The proud will be humbled. In the book of Proverbs, it is written, pride goes before destruction, and arrogance before a fall. In Christianity, among the 7 deadly sins of man, pride stands first and is considered the gravest of sins. Christ even washed the feet of his disciples, setting an example of humility. And James instructed, God resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted, says the Gospel of Luke. Islam strongly condemns arrogance. The Quran says, do not walk on the earth with pride. Allah does not love the arrogant boasters. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, taught that humility elevates a person and that in the heart of a believer there should not be even a grain of arrogance. The legend of the fall of Iblis, or Satan, in Islam emphasizes that it was pride that made him an outcast. Folktales confirm all these lessons. In Anderson's fable about the naked king, the king, blinded by pride and flattery, marches naked before his subjects, imagining himself in magnificent attire. In the myth of Narcissus, a young man in love with his own reflection perishes. Everywhere, pride leads to downfall. Modesty adorns a person, our grandmothers used to say. Proverbs and folk wisdom agree. Don't say hop before you jump over the pit. Don't count your chickens before they hatch. Psychologist Carl Jung wrote, because of pride, we constantly deceive ourselves. Our ego builds illusions, while humility helps us see the truth. So, from biblical times to our days, folk wisdom aligns with philosophy and religion. Ego is the path to error and shame, while humility leads to elevation. History teaches that those who humbly accept reality will avoid misfortune. Write in the comments if there have been moments in your life when ego got in the way, or, on the contrary, humility helped you. Please share your experience. I would love to read it. The ancients were right, and modern science confirms the harmful influence of an inflated ego. Our ego creates cognitive distortions or systematic thinking errors, often tied to self-deception. Let's look at what distortions our ego creates. The overconfidence effect, perhaps the most famous trick of our ego. People tend to overestimate their abilities. According to research, 74% of people consider themselves above average, which is mathematically impossible. Such delusions occur in business, finance, politics, and everywhere else. The biased blind spot. We notice others' mistakes, but fail to see our own. A study showed that 99.8% of participants consider themselves less biased than others. As a rule, the more confident a person is in their objectivity, the less open they are to criticism. The self-serving bias. This is when we attribute success to ourselves and failure to circumstances. It protects our self-esteem but hinders growth. Admitting mistakes is unpleasant, so our brain twists reality, saying, I did everything right. It's the world that's unfair. A leader who blames the market for failure does not learn from their mistakes. An athlete who blames the referee will never improve their technique. The confirmation effect. IT makes us seek only the information that confirms our point of view, ignoring inconvenient facts. The control illusion. This is the belief that we can control what is objectively beyond our power. For example, a casino player is convinced they have a secret strategy to beat the roulette wheel. Why? Because our ego loves the feeling of power. The Dunning-Kruger effect. It shows that the less a person knows, the more confident they are. Ignorant people overestimate their abilities, while knowledgeable ones tend to doubt themselves. Simply put, the fewer the competencies, the louder the bragging. Billionaire investor Ray Dalio calls the ego the main enemy of good decisions. It prevents us from admitting mistakes and accepting criticism. Thus, modern science has merely organized what the sages warned us about long ago. Ego distorts our perception, giving rise to false confidence, illusions, and mistakes. Remove the ego, and you will remove a huge number of thinking errors, becoming closer to reality. Ego-driven leaders often become the cause of company collapse. Let's look at 3 examples. Enron, an energy giant that collapsed in 2001. A culture of arrogance led by CEO Jeff Skilling resulted in debt concealment and financial fraud. Hubris and excessive pride drove the leadership into risky schemes until reality brought the company down. Nokia, in the 2000s, it dominated the mobile phone market but lost its position because it refused to adapt to the smartphone revolution. The management did not take the threat of iPhone and Android seriously, believing that buttonless phones were unnecessary. As a result, Nokia missed the moment and became uncompetitive, eventually selling its mobile business. WeWork, a startup once valued at $47 billion, collapsed due to the megalomania of its founder Adam Neumann. That he spent investments on reckless ventures, ignored financial metrics, and was convinced of his own infallibility. When investors finally realized the true state of affairs, the IPO failed. The company lost its value, and Newman was fired. This is a classic case of arrogance, when a leader loses touch with reality. History shows that egocentric leaders don't listen to advice, surround themselves with sycophants, and ignore risks, which inevitably leads a company to collapse. Paraphrasing investor Peter Keefe, in business, there are two kinds of people, the humble and those whom the market is about to humble. On the other hand, humility helps companies thrive. Jim Collins, in his research Good to Great, found that the greatest CEOs combined personal humility with professional will. Satya and Nadella, after taking over Microsoft, built a culture of learning rather than know-it-all arrogance, which helped the company regain its leadership. Warren Buffett emphasizes the importance of recognizing one's limitations. In investing, there are two types of people, the humble and those whom the market will humble. The conclusion is clear. Egotism leads to failure, while humility leads to success. True leaders put the company's well-being above their vanity. They admit mistakes and are willing to learn. I'm sure you also have plenty of examples from your own life where ego prevented you from making the right decision. And as a result, you made the wrong one. Share them in the comments. Everyone will find it interesting to read. We've covered a vast range of knowledge, from ancient wisdom to modern business cases, and everywhere we see the same theme. Ego is the inner enemy of rationality and efficiency. It acts like a filter, distorting incoming information, creating false confidence, and hindering our learning. As Confucius wisely said, humility is the foundation of all virtues, because without it there can be no wisdom. That a person who believes they already know everything closes themselves off from new knowledge. An organization whose leaders do not tolerate objections is doomed to repeat mistakes. But when the ego is set aside, healthy curiosity, critical thinking, and openness to alternatives immediately awaken. Everything necessary for sound decision-making. Of course, it's impossible to completely get rid of the ego. We're not Buddhist monks detached from ourself, but it is quite realistic to recognize its influence and consciously reduce its role in making important decisions. Here are a few practical principles to help remove the ego from the decision-making process. First, remember your intention and goal, and subordinate your personal ambitions to them. Focus not on "I won," but on "the job is done right." Ask yourself, what would be better for the company, the team, or the family? Not for my ego. Second, rely on facts and numbers, not opinions, and always verify the reliability of your sources. Third, seek truth, not confirmation of your own ideas. Do this in any debate or brainstorming session. Deliberately invite opponents or appoint a devil's advocate to defend the opposing viewpoint. Ask them, where could I be wrong? Ray Dalio recommends practicing radical open-mindedness. Genuinely believe that you might not know something and actively seek the missing information. Fourth, admit mistakes and thank people for criticism. That it's not easy for the ego, but it's incredibly valuable. Consciously say, thank you for pointing out my mistake. This disarms your ego and turns every mistake into a lesson rather than a trauma. Fifth, practice empathy and a broad perspective. Try to imagine how the situation looks from another person's point of view. This flexible perspective often reveals blind spots. The Dalai Lama famously said, "When you are right, there's no need to shout." Calm confidence comes when your decision considers all sides, not just your ego. Sixth, in discussions, separate ideas from their authors so that people don't feel the need to defend their ideas at all costs. Seventh, engage an independent moderator for important discussions. Eighth, hire people smarter than yourself. Ninth, whenever possible, make collective decisions. 10th, establish a structured discussion format to ensure everyone can speak and has equal opportunity. I hope I've given you enough insight to see that de-egoization is a powerful tool for growth. It is supported by religion, philosophy, confirmed by science, and proven in practice that, of course, working on yourself is not easy. But as Socrates said, "I know that I know nothing, and in this lies his greatness." There are many tools and methods for removing the ego from the decision-making process. If this topic has resonated with you, don't stop here that I've only briefly touched upon many ideas. Behind each one stand books, studies, and techniques. Keep exploring this subject further. If you liked this video and found something valuable in it, give it a like and subscribe to my channel where I regularly share my thoughts. Thank you for watching, and remember the words of the wise. He who bows down gains the ability to be filled. Make decisions with wisdom, not with ego. Wish you success. See you in the next episodes.